Okay, so have you ever, like, woken up one morning and thought, who am I, really? Like, what is this self thing everyone's always talking about?
It's such a basic question, but it's kind of the biggest one, isn't it?
Totally. And the more you try to pin it down, the more slippery it gets.
Right, like, are we just what we do, or is there some deeper essence?
That's exactly what we're diving into today. The whole paradox of the self, how we're both consistent and constantly changing.
We've got some fascinating thinkers to help us unpack this stuff, philosophers, psychologists.
Oh, and we can't forget social media.
Yeah, how could we? It's like a whole other layer of self these
So
days.
let's start with the basics. Is there even such a thing as a true self? Are we born with it, or do we make it up as we go along?
Good question. I've always kind of liked the analogy of a river, you know?
Oh, yeah. Always flowing, always changing, but still the same river.
Exactly. There's this philosopher, Jean-Paul Sartre. He'd probably dig that analogy. He said, we aren't born with some preset identity.
So we're not just like little seeds destined to become a certain kind of flower.
Nope, Sartre believed we create ourselves through our actions, our choices, every step of the way.
So if I like decide to learn how to code or become a chef.
You're literally changing who you are adding to the mix.
But here's the thing, we're also obsessed with finding ourselves. Like there's this one true self hiding inside, just waiting to be discovered.
Oh yeah, that's everywhere. Self-help books, those online quizzes telling you what kind of bread you are based on your zodiac sign.
Exactly. But if we're always changing, how can there be just one true version?
It's a puzzle for sure. Another psychology giant, Alfred Adler, he had a different take.
Oh yeah, what do you say?
He said, the self is something we find, not something we create.
Okay, so now I'm even more confused. Do we discover it or build it?
Maybe it's both. Maybe it's a dance between the two.
I guess the real question is, what do you think, dear listener?
Yeah.
Has there been a time in your life where you felt like a totally different person? Maybe after a big move or a job change?
Because those moments, those are the ones that really make you question who you are, aren't they?
Totally. And speaking of questioning who we are, let's talk about memory and how much our past shapes who we are today.
Our memories, they're powerful. They tell the story of who we think we are.
Can you think of a memory that still has a strong hold on you, even now, something that still affects how you see yourself?
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Me too. I think those are the moments that really stick with us. They become part of our narrative.
A philosopher named John Locke, he believed that our identity actually depends on memory.
So without memories, we wouldn't have a sense of self.
Exactly. He thought that's what makes us the same person over time, the ability to recall our past.
But then what about people who have amnesia?
Yeah, that's a tough one. Makes you wonder if they're still the same person or if it's like a whole new identity forms.
Like in those movies where someone bumps their head and forgets everything.
Right, exactly. And it gets even more interesting when you think about how memory isn't always accurate.
What do you mean?
Well, we tend to remember things in a way that supports our current beliefs about ourselves.
Oh, so if I see myself as a confident person, I'm more likely to remember times when I was successful and kind of gloss over the times I totally messed up.
Exactly. It's like we're editing our own life stories, highlighting the chapters that fit the image we have of ourselves.
So we're not just shaped by our memories, but by how we choose to remember them.
Exactly. And that brings us to the wild world of social media, where the line between reality and our carefully crafted online selves gets even blurrier.
Because social media, it's basically a highlight reel, right? Everyone's showing off their perfect lives, their best moments.
Yeah. And it's tempting to compare ourselves and feel like we're not measuring up.
Totally. Like you scroll through Instagram and everyone's on vacation or eating amazing food or looking effortlessly glamorous.
It makes you wonder how much of it is real and how much is just a carefully constructed persona.
Right. Like, are we just performing for an audience instead of actually living our lives?
And that can be exhausting trying to maintain this perfect image all the time. No wonder so many people feel like they're not good enough.
It's like this pressure cooker of comparison and competition, and it can really mess with your sense of self.
Definitely, especially for young people who are still figuring out who they are.
It's like their identity is being shaped by likes and followers instead of their own values and experiences.
And that's something to be really mindful of, how this constant online self-presentation is affecting us all. And it's not just about comparing ourselves to others, it's also about how we present ourselves online?
Oh, totally. Like, are we being authentic or just putting on a show for the internet?
It's a tricky balance, right? Because we all want to put our best foot forward.
For sure. But I think there's a difference between sharing the highlights and pretending everything's perfect all the time.
Absolutely. And it's important to remember that social media is just a snapshot. It's not the whole picture.
It's like we're all curating these little online museums of ourselves choosing only the most flattering artifacts.
And it's easy to forget that everyone else is doing the same thing.
So we're comparing our behind the scenes to everyone else's highlight reel.
Exactly, and that's a recipe for feeling inadequate.
No wonder so many people struggle with self-doubt and insecurity these days.
It's tough to feel good about yourself when you're constantly bombarded with images of perfection.
Speaking of things that can impact our sense of self, what about relationships? I mean, think about it. How you are with your family is probably different from how you are with your coworkers, right?
Oh, definitely. We all play different roles in different contexts.
So is that being fake? Or are those different sides all still part of the real me?
Hmm, that's a good question. I think it's about authenticity within those roles.
So like, I might be more reserved at work, but that doesn't mean I'm not being genuine.
Exactly. It's about adapting to the situation while still staying true to yourself.
It's like we're multifaceted diamonds. Each side reflects light differently, but it's all still the same diamond.
I love that analogy, and some facets might only be visible to those we truly trust, you know?
Oh yeah, like maybe I only let my goofball side out around my closest friends.
Exactly, but that goofiness is still a part of who you are.
And those close relationships, those can actually help us discover parts of ourselves we didn't even know were there.
Absolutely. It's like we see ourselves reflected in their eyes and gain a new perspective on who we are.
It's like they hold up a mirror and we're like, oh, wow, I didn't realize I had that side to me.
And those deep connections can help us grow and become more whole.
But what about relationships that aren't so healthy? Can those affect how we see ourselves too?
Oh, unfortunately, yes. Relationships that are full of conflict or negativity can really damage our self-perception.
It's like they chip away at our confidence and make us question our worth.
Exactly. So it's important to surround ourselves with people who lift us up and support us.
Because the people we spend time with have a huge influence on how we see ourselves.
They can either help us shine or dim our light,
And so it's all about finding those relationships that bring out the best in us.
and letting go of the ones that hold us back.
It's a constant process, right?
Yeah.
Figuring out who we are while also being shaped with the people around us.
Exactly. And it's not just people, but technology is playing a huge role in shaping our sense of self these days.
Oh yeah, we were just talking about social media and how it can create this pressure to present a perfect image
Right. And it's easy to get caught in the comparison trap scrolling through everyone else's highlight reels.
and feeling like we're not good enough, not pretty enough, not successful enough.
It's a dangerous game to play, comparing our insides to everyone else's outsides.
Because what we see online is often just a carefully curated facade.
It's like everyone's putting on a performance, and it's hard to know what's real and what's not.
And that can really mess with your head, especially for young people who are still developing their sense of self.
It's like their identity is being shaped by likes and followers instead of their own values and experiences. It's crucial to be mindful of how social media affects us because it's not going away anytime soon.
So how do we navigate this digital landscape without losing ourselves in the process?
Yeah. I think it's about setting boundaries, being aware of the potential downsides, and remembering that what we see online is not always a reflection of reality.
So like maybe limit your time on social media or be more intentional about who you follow?
Exactly, and focus on cultivating real-life connections and experiences that nourish your soul.
Because true fulfillment comes from within, not from the number of likes on a post.
And speaking of technology and the self, it's not just social media, but all these advancements that are blurring the lines between the real and the virtual.
Like virtual reality and artificial intelligence.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's mind-blowing to think about the possibilities, but also a little unsettling.
Like what happens to our sense of self when we can create avatars and live in these virtual worlds?
It's a question philosophers and scientists are grappling with right now as technology continues to evolve at an unprecedented pace.
It's both exciting and scary, right? Like we're on the cusp of a whole new era of self-understanding.
And it's important to approach it with a healthy dose of caution and self-awareness.
Because as technology advances, we need to make sure we're not losing sight of what it means to be human.
Exactly. It's about using technology as a tool for connection and growth, not letting it define who we are.
So it's all about balance, right?
Yeah.
Embracing the possibilities while also staying grounded in our values and our humanity.
I think that's a great way to put it. It's about finding that sweet spot where technology enhances our lives without overshadowing our true selves.
And speaking of true selves, I'm curious to hear your thoughts on mindfulness and how it relates to this whole conversation.
Mindfulness, it's become such a buzzword, but for good reason.
I know, right? Everyone's talking about it, but what does it actually mean?
Well, in a nutshell, it's about paying attention to the present moment without judgment.
Okay, but how does that help us understand who we are?
Well, when we're constantly caught up in our thoughts about the past or worries about the future, we lose touch with the present moment.
And that's where our true selves reside.
Exactly. It's in the here and now that we can connect with our authentic selves without all the baggage of our stories and expectations.
So mindfulness is like a way to quiet the mental chatter and just be present with who we are.
Precisely. And in that space of non-judgmental awareness, we can start to see ourselves more clearly.
It's like taking off a mask and letting our true selves shine through.
And in that vulnerability, that raw authenticity, we can connect with a deeper sense of self, a self that goes beyond all the external definitions and expectations.
So mindfulness, it's about being present. But how do you actually DO that?
Well, there's a bunch of different techniques. Meditation is a big one.
Oh yeah, I've heard of that, but never really tried it.
It's basically training your mind to focus like lifting weights for your brain.
Okay, so I'm picturing myself sitting cross-legged on a mountaintop, chanting.
You can definitely do that if you want, but it doesn't have to be that intense.
Oh, good, because that sounds kind of intimidating.
Even just taking a few minutes each day to sit quietly and focus on your breath can make a difference.
Like just noticing the air going in and out.
Exactly. And when your mind starts to wander, and it will gently bring it back to your breath.
Okay, that sounds doable, but does it really help with all this self-discovery stuff?
It's all connected. Remember, when you're mindful, you're not judging yourself. You're just observing.
So instead of beating myself up for all the things I'm not, I can just be present with who I am right now.
Exactly. And from that place of acceptance, you can start to make choices that are truly aligned with your values.
It's like mindfulness helps me clear out all the mental clutter so I can actually hear my own inner voice.
That's a great way to put it. It's about connecting with your intuition, that deeper knowing of who you are.
So it's not about forcing myself to change, but about becoming more aware of who I already am.
Exactly. And that self-awareness is the foundation for everything else. Growth, relationships, career choices.
It's like mindfulness is the key that unlocks the door to our true selves.
And the cool thing is, it's a key we all have access to.
So no matter where we are on our self-discovery journey, we can always start by simply being present.
That's a powerful message right there. And it's a practice, a lifelong journey.
So we're never really done figuring ourselves out.
Nope. And that's a good thing. Means we're always growing, always evolving, always becoming.
This whole conversation has been so insightful. It feels like we've covered so much ground.
We have, from ancient philosophy to modern technology, it's all interconnected.
And it all comes back to this idea of embracing the paradox of the self.
How we're both constant and changing, how we're shaped by our experiences, but also have the power to create ourselves.
And how mindfulness can help us navigate this complex and ever-evolving journey of self-discovery.
It's been a real pleasure exploring this with you.
Likewise, thanks for sharing your wisdom with us today.
And to our listeners, keep questioning, keep exploring, and keep embracing the beautiful mystery of who you are.
Because the journey of self-discovery is a lifelong adventure, and it's one worth taking.